The laughter started before even left the briefing room. She stood at attention, her back straight and her face calm, while the alien officers around her made no effort to hide their amusement. The sound of their clicking mandibles and rumbling chests filled the grand chamber of the Imperial Command. Some of them did not even look at her. They simply laughed and shook their heads, as if they had just heard the most entertaining joke of the century. Commander was the loudest of them all. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled skin shimmering under the blue lights of the chamber. His 4 eyes narrowed with cruel pleasure as he looked down at the small human woman before him. "A human," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "They are sending a human to serve the Barren princess." More laughter followed his words. Did not react. She kept her eyes forward and her hands clasped behind her back. She had learned long ago that reacting to insults only made things worse. Humans were still new to the galactic community. They had only been part of the Empire for 20 years, and in that time they had earned a reputation for being weak, fragile, and short-lived. They were an ancient race. They lived for thousands of years. Their bodies were strong enough to survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. Their technology was so advanced that humans could barely understand the basic principles behind it. To them, humans were little more than clever animals who had somehow stumbled into the stars. Knew all of this. She had grown up hearing the whispers and seeing the looks of pity and contempt, but she had also learned something else during her years of service. She had learned that patience was a weapon, and she knew how to use it. "The assignment has been approved by the High Council," said the administrative officer, a thin with gray scales and tired eyes. He did not seem amused by the situation. If anything, he looked embarrassed. "Human aid will report to the Moon of 4 within 3 standard days. She will serve as the personal attendant to Princess until further notice." "Until further notice," repeated, and another wave of laughter swept through the room. "That means forever. No one comes back from 4. No one wants to." Finally allowed herself to speak. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I understand my assignment, Commander. I am ready to serve." Stopped laughing. He leaned down, bringing his massive face close to hers. His breath was hot and smelled of copper. "You do not understand anything, little human. Princess is not just exiled, she is forgotten. The Empire has erased her from all records. Her name is not spoken in the Imperial Court. She was declared barren and cast out like garbage. Serving her is not an honor, it is a punishment." "Then I will accept my punishment," said simply. Stared at her for a long moment. Then he straightened up and waved his hand dismissively. "Take her away. Let her rot on that dead moon with the forgotten princess. Perhaps they will keep each other company until they both turn to dust." The other officers began to leave the chamber, still chuckling among themselves. Remained standing until the administrative officer approached her with a data pad. "Your transport leaves in 6 hours," he said quietly. "I have uploaded all the necessary information to your personal device. Supplies, schedules, communication protocols. Not that you will need most of them. 4 is a dead world. There is nothing there except the princess and her prison." "Thank you," said, taking the data pad. The officer hesitated. For a moment, something like sympathy flickered in his ancient eyes. "I do not know why you accepted this assignment, human, but I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for." Did not answer. She simply bowed her head respectfully and walked out of the chamber. The corridors of the Imperial Command were vast and cold. Walked through them alone, her footsteps echoing against the polished stone floors. She passed dozens of along the way, but none of them acknowledged her. To them, she was already invisible. She was already gone. She made her way to the human quarters, a small section of the station that had been set aside for the handful of humans who worked in the Imperial service. Most of them were translators, engineers, or low-level administrators. None of them held positions of real importance. None of them were trusted with anything that mattered. Her room was small and plain. A bed, a desk, a storage unit, Nothing personal, nothing permanent. Had learned not to collect things. In her line of work, she moved too often to keep anything that she could not carry with her. She sat down on the edge of the bed and opened the data pad. The information about 4 appeared on the screen, and she began to read. 4 was a moon orbiting a gas giant on the outer edge of the Empire. It had no atmosphere, no water, and no natural resources of any value. The surface was covered in gray dust and sharp rocks. The only structure on the entire moon was a small outpost that had been built centuries ago for some forgotten purpose. Now it served as a prison for the princess who had been erased from history. Princess? The name appeared only once in the file, almost as an afterthought. There was no image, no biography, no record of her crimes or her exile. Just a name and a location. Nothing else. Read the information 3 times, memorizing every detail. Then she closed the data pad and lay back on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about what it said, a punishment. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps this assignment was meant to break her, to remind her of her place in the galaxy. Humans were small and weak. They did not belong among the stars. They certainly did not belong in the service of the Empire. But had never been very good at accepting her place. She had grown up on a colony world where humans were treated as second-class citizens. She had watched her parents work themselves to exhaustion for masters who barely noticed they existed. She had seen her brother die in a mining accident because the overseers did not think human safety was worth the cost of proper equipment. She had promised herself on the day of his funeral that she would never let them break her. She would survive. She would endure. And one day she would prove that humans were worth more than the galaxy believed. This assignment might have been meant as a punishment, but saw it as an opportunity. A forgotten princess on a dead moon. No supervision, no interference, no expectations. She could do whatever she wanted out there, far from the eyes of the Empire. And she intended to do something extraordinary. 6 hours later, boarded a small transport ship bound for the Outer Rim. The pilot was a bored who did not bother to speak to her during the entire journey. She sat in the cargo hold, surrounded by crates of supplies that would sustain her for the next standard year. The journey took 3 days. Spent most of that time reading, exercising, and preparing herself mentally for what lay ahead. She did not know what to expect from Princess. The files told her nothing useful, but she had dealt with difficult people before. She had learned how to be patient, how to listen, how to find the cracks in even the hardest shells. When the transport finally arrived at 4, felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She looked out the small viewport and saw the gray surface of the moon stretching out beneath her. It was exactly as the files had described. Lifeless, empty, forgotten. The outpost was a small dome sitting in the center of a flat plain. It looked old and weathered, its metal walls by centuries of micrometeorite impacts. A single landing pad jutted out from one side, barely large enough for the transport to set down. "This is your stop," the pilot said without looking at her. "Good luck, human, you are going to need it." Gathered her belongings and stepped off the transport. The moment her feet touched the ground, the ship lifted off and disappeared into the black sky, leaving her completely alone. She stood there for a moment, looking up at the stars. They seemed brighter here, away from the light pollution of the Imperial stations. Millions of points of light scattered across the darkness, each one a sun with its own worlds and its own stories. Somewhere out there, people were laughing at her. They thought she was finished. They thought she would waste away on this dead moon until she was as forgotten as the princess she had come to serve. They were wrong. Picked up her bags and walked toward the outpost. The airlock was old but functional. She entered the code from her data pad and waited as the door cycled open. A rush of warm air greeted her, carrying with it the stale smell of recycled oxygen and artificial lighting. She stepped inside and found herself in a small entry chamber. The walls were bare metal, spotted with rust and age. The floor was dusty, marked with footprints that had not been disturbed in years. Everything about this place spoke of neglect and abandonment. But did not see a prison. She saw a canvas, a blank space waiting to be filled with something new. She took a deep breath and walked deeper into the outpost, ready to meet the princess who had been erased from history, ready to begin the work that no one else believed was possible, ready to prove them all wrong. The outpost was larger than it appeared from outside, walked through narrow corridors that twisted and turned, passing empty rooms filled with dust and silence. Most of the doors were sealed shut, their control panels dark and lifeless. Only a few sections of the facility seemed to have power, and even those flickered with the uncertain light of systems that had not been properly maintained in decades. She followed the sound of breathing. It was a strange sound, deep and slow, like the rumble of distant thunder. It led her through the maze of corridors until she reached a large circular room at the center of the outpost. The ceiling was high, and the walls were lined with faded murals that showed scenes from history. Warriors in battle, ships crossing the void, a royal family standing proud beneath a golden sun. In the center of the room, on a platform raised above the floor, sat Princess. Stopped at the entrance and looked at her. The princess was unlike any she had ever seen. Her scales were not the usual green or blue or gray. They were white, pure white, like fresh snow under moonlight. Her eyes were closed and her body was perfectly still. She might have been a statue carved from marble, beautiful and cold and utterly lifeless. "I know you are there, human." The voice came suddenly, breaking the silence like a stone dropped into still water. Princess did not open her eyes. She did not move at all, but her voice filled the room with a power that made his heart skip a beat. "Your Highness," said, bowing her head respectfully, I have been assigned as your attendant. I know who you are. I know why you are here." The princess finally opened her eyes. They were silver, like polished mirrors, reflecting the dim light of the room. "You are here because no one else would come. You are here because serving me is considered worse than death. You are here because the Empire wanted to punish you for some crime I neither know nor care about." Straightened her back. "I am here because I was assigned here, Your Highness. I do not consider it a punishment." Princess laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was bitter and hollow, the laugh of someone who had forgotten how to feel joy. "Then you are either a fool or a liar. Which is it, human?" "Neither, Your Highness. I am simply someone who does her job." The princess stared at her for a long moment. Her silver eyes seemed to pierce right through, searching for something hidden beneath the surface. Finally, she looked away and waved her hand dismissively. "Do what you want. Clean the corridors, organize the supplies, play whatever little games humans play to pass the time. But do not expect anything from me. I have nothing to give, and I want nothing from you. We will exist in this place together until one of us dies, and then the other will continue alone. That is the only future waiting for us here." Did not argue. She simply bowed again and left the room to begin her work. The first week was difficult. The outpost was in terrible condition. The life support systems were barely functioning. The food synthesizers produced meals that tasted like cardboard. The water recyclers made strange noises and occasionally produced liquid that smelled of rust and chemicals. Worked from morning until night, fixing what she could and cleaning what could not be fixed. She scrubbed floors that had not been touched in years. She repaired broken lights and sealed cracks in the walls. She reorganized the storage rooms and created an inventory of all the supplies that had been sent with her. Throughout all of this, Princess ignored her completely. The princess spent most of her time in the central chamber, sitting motionless on her platform, staring at nothing. Sometimes would hear her moving through the corridors at night, but she never saw where she went or what she did. On the 8th day, decided to try something different. She prepared a meal using fresh ingredients from the supply crates. It was a simple dish, just rice and vegetables and a few pieces of preserved fish, but she cooked it herself using a small heating unit she had brought from her quarters. The smell filled the corridors, warm and familiar and alive. She brought the meal to the central chamber and placed it on a small table near the princess's platform. Then she sat down on the floor nearby and began to eat her own portion. Princess did not move. She did not acknowledge the food or the human sitting in her chamber, but noticed that her nostrils flared slightly, catching the scent of the meal. "It is not poisoned, Your Highness," said casually. "Though I understand if you do not trust me, we have only known each other for a week." "I do not eat human food," the princess said coldly. "Then do not eat it. I will leave it here in case you change your mind." Finished her meal in silence and then left the chamber. When she returned an hour later to collect the dishes, the food was gone. The plate had been licked clean. She smiled to herself and said nothing. The days turned into weeks. Continued her work, slowly transforming the neglected outpost into something that resembled a home. She repaired the environmental systems until the air was fresh and clean. She fixed the water recyclers until the liquid that came from the taps was pure and clear. She even managed to get the lighting systems working properly, filling the corridors with warm golden light instead of the harsh flickering white. She brought meals to the central chamber every day. Sometimes the princess ate them, sometimes she did not, never commented on it either way. She simply left the food and went about her business. On the 32nd day, Princess spoke to her again. "Why do you do this?" Looked up from the floor she was cleaning. The princess had not moved from her platform, but her silver eyes were focused on with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Do what, Your Highness?" All of this, the cleaning, the cooking, the repairs. You work as if this place matters, as if I matter, but we both know the truth. I am nothing. This place is nothing. You are wasting your time on a forgotten ghost in a forgotten tomb. Set down her cleaning tool and sat back on her heels. She looked at the princess for a long moment before answering. "When I was young, my grandmother had a garden. It was small, just a patch of dirt behind our housing unit on the colony where I grew up. Everyone told her it was a waste of time. The soil was poor, the light was bad, and nothing would grow. But she worked on that garden every day. She pulled weeds and turned soil and planted seeds. And eventually things grew, not much. A few flowers, some herbs, but they grew because she refused to give up on them." Princess' expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. A flicker of curiosity, quickly hidden behind walls of ice. "What happened to her garden?" "The overseers destroyed it when they expanded the mining operation. But my grandmother did not cry. She just found another patch of dirt and started again. She told me that the garden was not about the flowers. It was about the act of caring. It was about refusing to let the universe convince her that nothing beautiful was possible." The princess was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. "Your grandmother sounds like a fool." She was. The most stubborn, hopeful fool I ever knew. She died believing that the universe was full of possibilities, even though everything in her life told her otherwise. "And you, do you believe the same thing?" Smiled. "I believe that hope is a choice. I believe that caring about something, anything, is better than giving up. And I believe that you are not nothing, Your Highness. I believe there is still something inside you worth saving." Princess turned away. When she spoke again, her voice had returned to its cold, distant tone. "You are wrong. There is nothing inside me but emptiness. I was declared barren because that is what I am, empty, useless, a vessel with nothing to offer." "Is that what they told you? Or is that what you decided to believe?" The princess did not answer. She closed her eyes and retreated back into her silence, shutting out the world and everything in it. Watched her for a moment, then picked up her cleaning tool and went back to work. She did not push further. She had learned that some wounds needed time before they could be touched. Some walls needed patience before they could be climbed. She had plenty of both. That night, sat in her small quarters and wrote a letter. It was addressed to no one in particular. She knew it would never be sent. The communication systems in the outpost were monitored by the Empire, and any message that mentioned the princess would be erased before it reached anyone who mattered. But she wrote anyway. Day 32. The princess spoke to me today. Not much, just a few words, but it was more than she has said in weeks. I think she is starting to wonder about me. She cannot understand why I am here, why I care about this place and about her. The truth is, I am not entirely sure myself. All I know is that giving up is not an option. I made a promise to myself a long time ago and I intend to keep it. No matter how long it takes. No matter how hard it gets. I will not let the darkness win. She folded the letter and placed it in a small box under her bed. Then she turned off the light and went to sleep, dreaming of gardens growing in barren soil and stars shining through endless night. Outside on the gray surface of 4, the universe continued to turn, indifferent, eternal, waiting to see what would happen next. 3 months had passed since arrived on 4. The outpost had changed. The corridors were clean and bright. The machinery hummed with steady power. The air smelled fresh and the water ran clear, but was not satisfied. She wanted something more. She wanted life. The idea came to her while she was sorting through the supply crates that had arrived with the quarterly shipment. Most of the crates contained the usual things: food packs, water purification tablets, medical supplies, spare parts for the environmental systems. But one crate was different. It was smaller than the others, and it had been packed with unusual care. Inside found soil. Real soil, dark and rich and smelling of earth. Someone had sent her 3 kilograms of genuine growing medium, along with a selection of seed packets and a set of small gardening tools. There was no note, no explanation, no indication of who had sent this gift or why, but did not need to know the answers to those questions. She knew what she had to do. She chose an empty room near the main corridor. It was not large, just a storage space that had been cleared out weeks ago. But it had good lighting, and the temperature controls still worked. With some adjustments, she could make it warm enough for plants to grow. She worked for days, preparing the space. She built raised beds from spare metal panels and filled them with the precious soil. She adjusted the lighting to simulate the spectrum of a star, warm and golden like the sun that humans had evolved under. She rigged up a simple irrigation system using recycled water from the life support systems. And then she planted the seeds. They were small, almost too small to see. Tiny specks of potential buried in the darkness of the soil, covered them gently and watered them carefully and waited. Nothing happened. For 2 weeks the garden remained silent and still. The soil sat in its beds, dark and empty, showing no sign of life. Visited every day, checking the temperature and the moisture levels, adjusting the lights, waiting with patience that seemed endless. Princess did not ask about the garden. She did not ask about anything, but noticed that the princess had started leaving her chamber more often. She would walk through the corridors at night, her footsteps soft against the metal floors. Sometimes she would pause outside the garden room, standing in the doorway for long minutes before moving on. On the 16th day, found the first sprout. It was tiny, just a pale green thread pushing up through the dark soil. But it was alive. It was real. Something was growing in this place of metal and stone, this tomb on a dead moon where nothing was supposed to exist. Knelt beside the raised bed and stared at the sprout for a long time. She did not cry. She did not celebrate. She simply watched it sway gently in the artificial breeze from the ventilation system, alive and defiant against all odds. That evening, she brought dinner to the central chamber as usual. But this time, instead of leaving immediately, she sat down on the floor near the princess's platform. "Something is growing in the garden," she said. Princess did not respond. Her eyes were closed, her body still. "I know you have been watching. I see your footprints in the dust outside the door. You can come inside if you want. The plants will not judge you." Plants do not judge because plants do not think, the princess said coldly. They simply exist. They grow and die according to their nature without choice or meaning. Perhaps, but there is still something beautiful about that. Growing toward the light even in darkness, refusing to give up even when the odds are against you. Plants are stubborn that way. The princess opened her eyes, her silver gaze fixed on with an expression that was hard to read. You speak of plants as if they are alive. They are alive, Your Highness. That is the whole point. Life on this moon is an illusion. Nothing truly lives here. Not the plants, not you, and certainly not me. We are all just waiting to die. Smiled. Then why do you keep getting out of bed every morning? Why do you walk the corridors at night? Why do you eat the meals I prepare? If you truly believed that death was all that remained, you would have given up long ago. But you have not. Something inside you still wants to live. Princess turned away, but she did not tell to leave. More sprouts appeared over the following days. First 5, then 10, then 20. The garden came alive with small green shoots pushing toward the artificial sunlight. Spent hours tending to them, watering and pruning and talking to them in a soft voice. She did not notice when Princess first entered the garden. She only looked up from her work and found the princess standing at the edge of the room, staring at the growing plants with an expression of wonder that she could not quite hide. They are real, the princess whispered. Yes, Your Highness, they are real. Walked forward slowly, as if approaching a wild animal that might flee at any sudden movement. She knelt beside one of the raised beds and reached out with a slender, scaled hand. Her fingers hovered above a young plant, trembling slightly. I have not seen anything grow in a very long time, she said. The Empire does not allow gardens on warships or space stations. They consider it a waste of resources. And on this moon, nothing has ever grown. Nothing was ever supposed to grow. Sometimes things grow in places where they are not supposed to, said gently. Sometimes that is what makes them special. The princess touched the plant. Her fingers were cold against the warm green leaves, but the plant did not wither or die. It simply bent slightly under her touch and then straightened again, resilient and strong. How do you do it? Asked. How do you keep hopping when everything around you is dead? How do you keep caring when no one else does? Thought about the question for a long moment. When she answered, her voice was quiet but firm. Because the alternative is giving up, and giving up means letting them win. The people who laughed at me when I accepted this assignment. The commanders who thought I was worthless. The empire that treats humans like expendable resources. If I stop hopping, if I stop caring, then they were right about me all along, and I refused to let them be right. The princess was silent. Her hand remained on the plant, feeling the texture of its leaves, the warmth of its life. I was not always like this, she said finally. There was a time when I believed in things, when I had dreams and ambitions and hope, but that was before they took everything from me. My title, my family, my future. They declared me barren and cast me out like I was nothing, like I had never existed at all. Why, asked, why did they do that to you? His expression hardened. Her silver eyes grew cold once more, walls rising to protect the wounded heart beneath. Because I was dangerous, because I asked questions they did not want answered, because I saw things they wanted hidden. The barrenness was a lie, a convenient excuse to remove me from the line of succession without causing a scandal. They could not simply kill a princess, but they could make her disappear. Felt a cold anger building in her chest. She had suspected something like this. The files had been too empty, the silence too complete. Princesses were not simply forgotten without reason. What did you see? What questions did you ask? The princess stood up and turned away. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible above the hum of the ventilation system. I cannot tell you. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. The truth is too dangerous, and you are too important to lose to the shadows that hunt me. Important, I am just a human aid. I am nobody. looked back at her, and for the first time there was something warm in her silver eyes, something almost like affection. "You are not nobody. You are the first person in 20 years who has treated me like I am worth something. You are the first person who has refused to give up on me, even when I gave you every reason to walk away. That makes you more valuable than all the treasures in the Empire." Did not know what to say. She stood there, surrounded by the small green plants that had somehow survived against all odds, and felt something shift in the air between them. A barrier falling. A bridge being built. "I will keep your secrets," she said. "Whatever they are. I will not ask again until you are ready to tell me, but I want you to know something, Your Highness. Whatever happens, whatever truths come to light, I will not abandon you. I made a choice when I came here, and I do not intend to change my mind." The princess nodded slowly. A single tear ran down her white-scaled cheek, catching the light like a diamond. Thank you for not giving up." That night the princess came to the garden again. She sat among the plants, running her fingers over their leaves, breathing in the green scent of life. And for the first time since had arrived on 4, she heard the princess sing. It was a song, ancient and beautiful, full of sorrow and hope and longing. Did not understand the words, but she understood the emotion behind them. It was the song of someone rediscovering something they thought they had lost forever. It was the song of someone learning to live again. 6 months had passed. The garden had grown beyond all expectations. What had started as a few sprouts in a single room had expanded into something remarkable. Vegetables ripened in neat rows. Flowers bloomed in colors that had never been seen on 4 before. The air inside the outpost smelled of earth and green things, a constant reminder that life was possible even in the most unlikely places. Princess spent most of her time in the garden now. She had learned to tend the plants under patient instruction, and she had discovered a talent for it. Her long, delicate fingers were perfect for the careful work of pruning and weeding. Her keen eyes could spot the earliest signs of disease or distress in a leaf. She talked to the plants sometimes in the old tongue and liked to think they listened. The princess had changed in other ways too. She no longer sat motionless on her platform for days at a time. She walked the corridors with purpose. She ate regular meals and slept regular hours. The hollow look in her silver eyes had begun to fade, replaced by something that resembled hope. But she still carried her secrets like stones in her heart, and knew that until those secrets were shared, the healing would never be complete. The truth came out on a night like any other. They were sitting in the garden, surrounded by the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft hum of the irrigation system. The artificial lights had been dimmed to simulate evening, casting warm shadows across the growing plants. "I was 12 years old when I first learned the truth about the Empire," said suddenly. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I was playing in the archives, as children do, exploring rooms that I should not have been in, and I found something, documents, records, evidence of something terrible." Set down the tool she had been holding and gave the princess her full attention. She did not speak. She simply waited. Empire presents itself as a force for order and civilization in the galaxy. We tell ourselves that we bring peace and prosperity to the worlds we conquer, but the truth is much darker than that. We are not liberators. We are exploiters. We strip worlds of their resources and leave them to die. We enslave populations and work them until they are used up. And when a species becomes inconvenient, when they demand rights or freedom or simply cost too much to maintain, we eliminate them. She paused, her silver eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the walls of the garden. There was a species called the gentle beings, peaceful and creative. They lived on a world rich in rare minerals that the Empire needed for its warships. They were willing to share their resources, to work with us as partners. But partnership was not profitable enough. So the High Council decided to remove them. Remove them. His voice was barely a whisper. Genocide. They engineered a plague that targeted the specifically. Within 2 years, the entire species was dead. Every man, woman, and child. The official records claim they were destroyed by a natural disaster, but I saw the truth. I saw the research reports and the death tolls and the celebrations that followed the successful completion of the project. The princess closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I was a child. I did not understand what I had found. I went to my father, the emperor, and I showed him the documents. I asked him to explain, and he did. He told me that this was how empires were built, on the bones of the weak, on the blood of the innocent. He told me that one day I would understand, that I would learn to accept these truths as necessary evils. But you never did. No, I never did. As I grew older, I began to ask questions. I spoke of reform, of justice, of accountability. I challenged the council members who had approved the genocide. I demanded investigations into other atrocities that I suspected had been committed, and slowly I became a threat, a problem that needed to be solved. So they declared you barren. They fabricated medical records showing that I could never produce an heir. In culture, this is the greatest shame a member of the royal family can suffer. It made me unfit for the throne and gave them an excuse to send me away. Far away, where I could never speak the truth or threaten their power again. Sat in silence, processing what she had heard. The weight of it was enormous. Genocide, conspiracy, the corruption of an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. And this woman, this princess who had been broken and discarded, had carried this burden alone for 20 years. Why are you telling me this now? Asked. Looked at her with something like amazement in her eyes. Because you asked me to trust you, because you have earned that trust 100 times over, and because I am tired of carrying this alone. For 20 years I have been silent. For 20 years I have let the darkness eat away at my soul, but you showed me that silence is not the only option. You showed me that hope is still possible, even in the darkest places. What do you want to do? The princess straightened her back. When she spoke, her voice was stronger than I'd ever heard it. I want to go back. I want to stand before the council and speak the truth. I want to expose the lies and the crimes and the blood on their hands. I know it may cost me my life. I know they will try to silence me again. But I would rather die speaking the truth than live another day in this prison of silence. Reached out and took the princess's hand. Her small, warm fingers wrapped around the cold, scaled palm. Then we will do it together. You will not face them alone. You do not understand the danger. If I return, everyone close to me will be targeted. You could be killed simply for standing beside me. I understand the danger perfectly, but I also understand something else. Some things are worth dying for. Justice is one of them, truth is another, and so are the people we care about. Stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her, and it was beautiful. You are the strangest human I have ever met, and the bravest. I am just someone who keeps her promises. They began to plan that night. It would not be easy. The outpost had no ships, no weapons, no allies. They were alone on a dead moon at the edge of the universe, with an empire of 1,000 worlds standing against them. But they had something that the empire did not expect. They had the truth, and they had each other. Over the following weeks began to recover her strength. She exercised daily, rebuilding the muscles that had wasted away during her years of isolation. She practiced combat forms that she had learned as a child, ancient techniques that had been passed down through generations of royalty. Her movements were slow at first, clumsy and uncertain, but gradually the grace and power returned. Helped in every way she could. She served as a training partner, learning combat techniques so that the princess would have someone to practice with. She was not strong enough or fast enough to be a real challenge, but she was persistent, and she improved quickly. She also began to work on another project, something she had not told the princess about. Deep in the outpost systems, buried beneath layers of security protocols and monitoring software, she found what she was looking for. a communication relay. It was old and damaged, but it was also hidden from the Empire's surveillance network. Someone had built it a long time ago, perhaps the original builders of the outpost, as a way to send messages without being detected. It took her 3 weeks to repair it. She worked at night, when the princess was sleeping, using skills she had learned during her years in the Imperial service. By the end, she had a functioning transmitter capable of reaching the nearest inhabited system. She sent her first message on a quiet evening, while the princess meditated in the garden. "This is human aid assigned to the outpost on 4. I am sending this message to anyone who believes in truth and justice. Princess lives. She has evidence of crimes committed by the High Council. She is ready to speak. If there is anyone willing to listen, please respond." The message went out into the darkness of space, a tiny signal crossing vast distances. Did not know if anyone would receive it. She did not know if anyone would respond. But she had to try. She had to believe that somewhere in the galaxy there were others who cared about the truth. 3 days later, the response came. It was encrypted, transmitted on a frequency that should have been impossible to access. The voice that spoke was unfamiliar, but the words sent a chill down spine. "We hear you. We have been waiting for this moment for 20 years. The Resistance stands with Princess. Tell her that she is not forgotten. Tell her that when she is ready, we will come for her. Tell her that the darkness is about to end." Played the message for the princess that night. Listened in silence, her silver eyes wide with shock and something that looked like wonder. "They remember me," she whispered. "After all this time, they still remember. They never forgot, and neither did I." The princess turned to face her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, then reached out and pulled into an embrace, holding her tightly as tears streamed down her face. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for never giving up." Held her back, feeling the warmth of connection that had grown between them over months of shared struggle and hope. "This is just the beginning," she said. "The hard part is still ahead, but we will face it together. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Outside the outpost, the stars continued their endless dance. Somewhere among them, ships were moving. Plans were being made. The wheels of change were beginning to turn. And on a dead moon at the edge of the galaxy, 2 unlikely allies prepared to challenge an empire. The ships arrived on a morning that looked like any other. Was in the garden, watering the plants that had become like children to her, when she heard the rumble of engines breaking through the thin, artificial atmosphere of the outpost. She set down her watering can and walked to the observation window, her heart pounding in her chest. 3 vessels hung in the black sky above 4. They were not Imperial ships. Their hulls were patched and worn, their designs outdated by at least a century, but they were armed and they were waiting. The Resistance had come. Princess appeared beside her, dressed not in the plain robe she had worn during her exile, but in armor. It was old armor, discovered in a sealed room at the back of the outpost, but it had been cleaned and repaired until it gleamed like silver. The crest of the royal house was emblazoned on the chest plate, marking her as what she truly was, a princess of the Empire. "Are you ready?" asked. "I have been ready for 20 years. Turned to face her, and there was fire in her silver eyes. "The question is whether you are ready. This is your last chance to stay behind. You could remain here, safe and forgotten, until all of this is over. I did not come all this way to watch from the sidelines. Where you go, I go. That was the promise I made." The princess smiled. It was a warrior's smile, fierce and proud. "Then let us go change the galaxy." The journey to the Imperial capital took 2 weeks. The Resistance ships were fast, but they had to travel carefully, avoiding the regular patrol routes and surveillance networks that crisscrossed the Empire. Spent most of the journey learning about the people who had answered her message. They were rebels, outcasts, survivors of the Empire's cruelty from a dozen different worlds. Some were, members of noble houses who had been purged for asking the wrong questions. Others were members of conquered species who had lost everything to imperial expansion. They had been operating in secret for decades, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment had finally come. The leader of the resistance was unnamed. He was old, his scales faded to gray, his body bent by years of hardship. But his mind was still sharp, and his hatred for the High Council burned as bright as ever. "We have been watching you since the day you were assigned to 4, he told during one of their planning sessions. "We did not know what to expect from a human aid. Your species is still new to the galaxy. But when we saw how you treated the princess, how you refused to give up on her, we knew you were different. We knew you were someone we could trust." "How did you watch us?" The outpost was supposed to be completely isolated. Smiled. "The outpost was built by members of the resistance, 100 years before the princess was ever sent there. We have had eyes inside from the beginning. We saw everything you did. Every meal you cooked, every plant you grew, every moment of kindness you showed to a woman the Empire wanted to forget." Did not know what to say. She had believed she was alone on that dead moon, struggling against impossible odds. But she had never been alone. Someone had always been watching, hopping, waiting. "Why did you not reach out sooner?" she asked. "Because we needed to be sure. The princess had been broken when she arrived. We did not know if she could be healed. We did not know if she still had the strength to fight. But you showed us that she did. You brought her back to life, you gave us back our princess." The resistance fleet arrived at the imperial capital on the day of the Grand Assembly. It was a gathering that occurred once every decade, when the High Council met in open session to address the leaders of all the worlds under imperial control. Thousands of delegates would be present. Millions more would be watching through broadcast networks across the galaxy. It was the perfect stage for the truth. The resistance ships emerged from hyperspace in the heart of the capital system, their weapons powered but not firing. They were immediately surrounded by Imperial warships, a fleet that outnumbered them 50 to 1. But they did not retreat. They simply held their position and sent a single message to the surface below. "Princess of the House of Stars requests an audience with the Grand Assembly. She comes to speak the truth." The response came within minutes. It was from Commander, the same officer who had laughed at almost a year ago. His voice was cold with barely contained rage. "The princess you speak of does not exist. She was declared barren and removed from the line of succession. Any vessel claiming to carry her is in violation of imperial law." Took the communication device from the resistance operator. When she spoke, her voice carried across every channel, broadcast to every ship in the system. "I am Princess, daughter of Emperor Karan III, heir to the throne of the Empire. I was not barren. I was silenced because I dared to speak the truth, and I will not be silenced again. Allow me to address the assembly, or watch your own people learn that truth here and now, in front of the entire galaxy." There was a long pause. Then finally, the Imperial fleet parted. A path opened to the surface of the capital world, guarded by warships on every side. "You have been granted an audience," said. His voice was tight, controlled. "But if you make a single move against the Council, you will be destroyed." "I am not here to destroy anyone. I am here to let the truth speak for itself." The resistance ship carrying and descended through the atmosphere and landed on the steps of the Grand Assembly Hall. It was a massive structure, built from white stone that gleamed in the light of the capital's twin suns. Thousands of delegates lined the steps, watching in shock as the doors of the ship opened. Stepped out first. She walked with the grace and power of a born ruler, her armor shining, her head held high. Behind her came, dressed in a simple uniform that bore no rank or insignia. She was just a human aide, small and fragile compared to the towering around her. But she walked with the same confidence as the princess, unafraid of the eyes that watched her every step. The assembly hall was vast, a dome that stretched hundreds of meters into the sky. The seats were filled with delegates from every world in the Empire, their faces turned toward the central platform where the High Council sat in judgment. At the head of the council was an empty throne, the seat of the emperor who had died 3 years ago without nomming an heir. Walked to the center of the platform and stood before the council. Her silver eyes swept across the faces of the men and women who had condemned her, who had stolen her life and her future. Members of the High Council, delegates of the Grand Assembly, citizens of the Empire, I stand before you today to speak a truth that has been buried for far too long. She began to tell her story. She spoke of the documents she had found as a child. She spoke of the genocide She spoke of other atrocities, other crimes, other lies that had been used to maintain the Council's grip on power. She named names. She provided evidence. She showed records and recordings that the resistance had gathered over decades of secret investigation. The council tried to interrupt her. They called her a liar, a traitor, a madwoman. But the broadcast was live, transmitted to every world in the Empire, and there was no way to silence her without proving her point. So they sat and listened as she exposed their crimes to the universe. When she finished, the hall was silent. Thousands of delegates stared at the council with new eyes, seeing them not as leaders but as criminals. The weight of truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I do not ask for the throne, said. I do not ask for power or revenge. I ask only for justice. I ask that those responsible for these crimes be held accountable. And I ask that the empire I love be transformed into something worthy of that love. The delegates began to speak. First one, then 10, then 100. They demanded answers. They demanded investigations. They demanded change. The council members looked at each other with fear in their eyes, seeing their power crumbling around them. Commander tried to restore order. He called for guards to arrest the princess. But the guards did not move. They stood at attention, their eyes on, waiting to see what would happen next. One of the council members, an ancient named, rose from his seat. He was one of the oldest members, one of those who had approved the genocide all those years ago. His hands trembled as he spoke. The princess speaks the truth. I was there. I approve the actions she describes. I have carried this guilt for my entire life and I am tired of hiding. The council is guilty. I am guilty. We deserve whatever punishment the assembly decides. The confession broke the dam. Other council members began to speak, some denying involvement, others admitting their crimes. The hall descended into chaos as delegates shouted and argued and demanded justice. In the midst of it all, turned to. Her silver eyes were bright with tears, but her smile was radiant. We did it. We actually did it. Took her hand and squeezed it tightly. You did it. You spoke the truth. You changed everything. I could not have done it without you. You saved me. You brought me back from the darkness. Whatever happens now, I want you to know that. The following days were filled with hearings and investigations and dramatic changes to the structure of the empire. The High Council was dissolved. Many of its members were arrested and charged with crimes against the galaxy. New leaders were elected from among the delegates, people who promised reform and accountability. Princess was offered the throne. She refused it. Instead, she proposed a new form of government, one where power would be shared among the worlds of the empire rather than concentrated in a single ruler. The proposal was accepted, and the first steps toward a new era began. Through it all, remained by her side. She was officially recognized as the princess's chief advisor, the first human to hold such a position in the history of the empire. The who had once laughed at her now bowed their heads in respect. The universe that had dismissed humans as weak and worthless had learned a different lesson. On the day that the new government was formally established, stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Below her, the streets were filled with celebrating crowds. joined her on the balcony, her white scales glowing in the fading light. "What are you thinking about?" the princess asked. "My grandmother's garden. She would have loved this. She always believed that beautiful things could grow in the worst places. She was right." Put her arm around shoulders. "She was right about something else too. You told me once that the garden was not about the flowers. It was about the act of caring. It was about refusing to give up." "I remember. I understand that now. You planted seeds in me, seeds of hope and courage and love, and look what grew." Leaned into the embrace, feeling the warmth of connection that had become the most important thing in her life. "This is just the beginning, you know. There is still so much work to do, so many wrongs to right, so many changes to make." "I know, but we will do it together, you and me side by side, for as long as we both live." They stood there in silence, watching the sun set on the old empire and rise on something new. Two unlikely allies who had found each other on a dead moon and changed the course of history. They had laughed at the human posted to the Barren princess. They were not laughing anymore.